Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. Again, my voice may be still a little bit off, just still kind of working through that illness, but I'm about in the clear. I'm feeling a lot better, and should be back to normal starting next week with our later episodes. But yeah, we are back with our part 2 episode covering location Cqarbon. Before we dive in, just want to go over a couple of things. We do have a new location in the game, so I want to talk about that here. But also, in our recording with Cqarbon, we were going off a list of locations on marvelsnap.io, but it turns out we were missing a couple, and there's been a couple locations that have come out in the last couple of weeks that I don't think we covered either. So just want to give kind of a high level of 5 locations that we didn't really cover in the interviews. Just wanted to make sure you guys heard my thoughts about them briefly. So the new location that just actually came out this week is Asgard. Obviously, with the Thor kind of season pass this month, this makes that sense thematically. Asgard, basically, after turn 4, the person who is winning at that location gets to draw 2 extra cards. So this plays into the synergy with Thor, where you shuffle Mjolnir into your deck, and then you want to draw Mjolnir kind of in those last couple turns of the game. And because Thor is a 4-drop, I think kind of the theme here is you play Thor, you win the location, you get the 2 extra cards, and then ideally you're drawing Mjolnir and getting that extra 6 power. And so that's Asgard. Some of the other newer locations, first, Lemuria. Lemuria makes it so when that location appears, the turn it appears on, no cards are revealed. This is an interesting one. There are a lot of cards that have an unrevealability, and there's cards where you really want to get the ability on a certain turn for that unrevealability. Okoye, and other cards where you're kind of getting buffs or certain things. Usually you're wanting to get those early or at a certain point with your hand or your deck. And so if that's not happening on the turn, that has thrown me off. And so it's an interesting location for sure. And but it also, it can be beneficial. Your opponent doesn't know what you've played there yet for an extra turn, and sometimes that can add a little mystery and cause some misplays by your opponent. And then another location that's been added, this is several weeks ago now, is Monster Island. Monster Island adds a 9-power monster to each side of the board, which is very interesting because essentially it's a net 0 between you and your opponent. And so I always try to kind of figure out, okay, am I going to just not target this location because I basically lose a spot and I'm kind of at a net gain against my opponent? Or do I want to, assume my opponent's going to not try to play there because of the monster being there? So then I want to buff it up a ton with some of my biggest cards. So an interesting one for sure that I kind of flip-flop on how I try to play against it. Well, those are the newer locations. I really quick wanted to cover 2 of the ones that me and Cqarbon missed in our recording, which is TVA, or the Time Variance Authority. This location causes the game to end after turn 4. So again, games are normally 6 turns. We have a location that increases the turn limit to 7 turns, but this one decreases it from 6 turns to 4 turns. This one's interesting because obviously shortens the game, and so if this reveals on turn 3 as your 3rd location, you only have 1 more turn after this. And, sometimes that's an instant retreat for some people because you're already behind, or you were really planning to play all your biggest cards on 5 and 6, and you just know you're not going to be able to win. So a very interesting card. One thing I like to do, I like to play Scarlet Witch in my main deck, and Scarlet Witch will change the location. So sometimes I like to change this on turn 4 or on 3, etc. So people think that the game's going to end early, but then I change so the game extends. So sometimes that causes some misplays by an opponent, them anticipating the game ending earlier. And then the last location that me and Cqarbon missed in our recording was the sewer system. There's a location that decreases cards by 3 power, one that decreases by 2, and this one's the one that decreases cards by 1. So obviously the least worst of these locations. But obviously, if you play 1 card there, you're getting -1 power, not a big deal. If you play 4 cards there, obviously, cumulatively, you're getting a -4. So not the end of the world. Usually I try to play into this location. Paid a lot of my opponents aren't going to. And so usually I can get kind of an advantage here by being willing to take the hit on the minus power by kind of stacking this location with a lot of cards. Well, I appreciate your patience. I just wanted to make sure we covered all these locations just as part of this series this week as we're covering all the locations. I will say, the first part of this conversation launched earlier this week. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go listen to that one first because we kind of covered the first half of the locations in that episode. Once you finish that, come right back here because we are going to dive into the remaining locations. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Up next, we have Negative Zone. Negative Zone reads, cards here have -3 power. So this is what I alluded to. There's a couple locations like this. Obviously, the lowest one we currently have. I guess, what is your strategy with this one? I mean, if you were to max this out with 4 cards, that's a -12.
Yeah. Negative Zone is interesting because sometimes in the -1 and -2, you can overcome the negatives if you have enough cards there, and you're buffing them with Nova or Blue Marvel. There's other cards, but Negative Zone, the -3 power is just absolutely brutal for Swarm decks to try and deal with. So I think Negative Zone leans more towards that you're wanting to put your biggest card into here, and have it win you the location.
Agreed. Up next, we have New York. New York reads, on turn 6, you can move cards to this location. This is an interesting one. I feel like I don't take advantage of it enough, but I mean, really, it can be really good for you, but also it really opens it up for both you and your opponent, right? You can be planning towards it during the game, but really turn 6, it kind of can be anybody's guess of how powered each location is going to shake down.
Yeah, New York is absolutely crazy and has by far led to the most 50-50 games that I've experienced. New York is also, as soon as a movement deck with a card like Multiple Man, Human Torch, Vulture, as soon as they see New York, they get super excited. If I'm playing a movement deck and I see New York, I snap almost immediately. So this card is very, very cool. I also, this is another card that I really, really love the theme and design of how it matches with Kingpin, which is a card that prevents that if you move card, it says on reveal, if you move cards here next turn, destroy them. And Kingpin's like home is New York. So I just think that little theme is really, really cool as well.
Yeah, he's like, no, not in my city, right? It's great. Up next, we have Nova Roma, which is interesting. The effect is basic. Draw a card. So both players draw a card one time. But then for me, it's kind of just, once that happens, right, it doesn't do anything the rest of the game. So it's kind of a play as you will, right?
Yeah, Nova Roma is super, super interesting. I think I believe it favors decks that are looking to find specific cards, so like combo decks. Because normally in a game you're only going to draw 9 cards out of your 12-card deck. So drawing 10 cards out of your deck greatly increases the chances that you're going to see your combo pieces that you need.
Yeah, very great point. And leading right into it, just works out alphabetically. Olympia, the next location, reads draw 2 cards. So I don't know if you have anything else to add here. I mean, essentially what you just said, this just helps you. Normally in a game, you draw 9 of your 12 cards without any extra draw, right? This makes it so you get 11 out of the 12, which can pretty much lock in, make sure you're going to get all the cards you need for your strategy.
Yeah, Olympia combo decks are extremely happy to see Olympia. That it is almost guaranteed that you're going to find at least one of your big combos in that deck.
Well, up next, we have Onslaught Citadel. Onslaught Citadel matches Onslaught, obviously. Reads, ongoing effects here are doubled. What do you like to see with this location?
So this obviously, favors ongoing cards, which we haven't currently in the kind of meta that's shaken out. We haven't really seen much for ongoing decks that are good. So it'll be interesting to see I think the main card that you'll see here a lot is Devil Dinosaur, because it gets its power doubled here, which is absolutely insane. So I'm sure some people have seen in some games the absolutely ridiculous amount of power you can get here with Iron Man and a copy of Onslaught. I think someone's gotten over 2 million power at this location before, which is pretty funny. So
Yes, I saw the same video, the same picture. Yeah, it's kind of crazy once you start exponentially growing here. So, well, up next, we'll cover this. It's not a location that normally shows up in the game, but just to explain, the location is called Ruins, and the description is a wasteland of destruction. There are a couple cards or a couple locations that can, we've already talked about one that can destroy locations. Anything that destroys a location will essentially leave it with ruins. I guess I shouldn't say that. Anything that ruins a location will leave it with ruins. There are effects that wipe a location completely off the board. I don't know. Not much to say here other than it basically just makes it a non-effect location. And yeah, not much to cover there. So we'll just jump to the next one, which is Cqar. Cqar says, put a card from each player's hand here. This has gone really well for me, and this has also gone very poorly for me. What are your thoughts on Cqar?
Cqar is a little bit more, is another one of those random ones. It can be good, it can be bad. I think it favors decks that are looking to go tall, so that are pulling, that have a higher chance to pull a big card out of your hand, but it also has a chance for combo decks that pull out combo pieces that you needed for later, like Cartage, or if it pulls out a card that discards another one of your important cards, that feels really bad. So sometimes it can work out, sometimes it doesn't. You can't really plan for it because the effect happens immediately. So
yes, yeah, exactly. Up next, we have Sanctum Sanctorum, which reads, cards can't be played here. Now, obviously, if this flips on a location where you've already played cards, those are there. But other than that, I mean, this plays well into move decks or cards that can buff other locations, kind of like you've already spoken to.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the two main ways to get power into Sanctum Sanctorum, and also cards that summon other cards at other locations. So things like White Tiger and Squirrel Girl are other ways to get into here. Sanctum is very, very challenging for decks that want to fill the board, especially if they aren't able to play cards here before it flips, because they don't have room on the board to play cards. So it can be a challenging one to deal with.
Yes, there has been a more than one game where this is flipped and I say, do I want to keep playing this game? Usually I try to play it out, but I'm like, I don't know. I already know this is going to go poorly. So up next, we have Savage Land. Savage Land reads, add 2 raptors on each side of this location. A raptor is a 1 cost, 1 power card. So it kind of fills half of the location for you and your opponent. This plays into a Nova Carnage combo, plays into a Khazar combo, anything else that you try to play into with Savage Land.
Savage Land is very interesting because it only gives you 2 slots, and that's if you haven't played a card there before it flipped. So potentially you have 1 slot to work with. So frequently I find myself playing like kind of my biggest card at Savage Land in order to win that location.
Yeah, agreed. Right. I've seen games where I've played and maybe my opponent's thinking the same thing. They're like, oh, I'm kind of locked out of this, maybe, and so they maybe don't, start to play cards there, and either I'll get a big card there or something like a dinosaur there that can kind of just overwhelm them at the end of the game. So up next, we have Shadowland. Shadowland reads, add a ninja to each side with -2 power. A ninja is a 1 cost, -2 power card. So it not only fills up 1 location for each of you, but obviously you're starting underneath, right? You're starting with a -2 power at this location.
Yeah, this one is super interesting. It gives you a lot of information. Again, this is another one. It takes up a slot on your opponent's board, so they can only play so many cards there. It also is a prime target for players playing destroy decks to destroy this -2 power in order to convert it. If Carnage eats it, Carnage gains power, and then you lose the -2 power, which is good for you. So you can kind of predict if your opponent's playing that style of deck where they're gonna that's the lane where they're gonna try and do their combo.
Yes, and you can try to lock them out or play to that strategy. Exactly. Well, up next, I think is my favorite location. I think I have a lot of fun with it. Sinister London, another one that plays into kind of a combination between location and card, similar abilities here. Sinister London reads, when you play a card here, add a copy to another location. So obviously, Mr. Sinister, when you play him, he creates a clone of himself. I love this card. I have so much fun in games when this is there because wild things happen, right? You're all of a sudden able to get duplicates of all your best cards kind of spread across the board, and it's just a fun ride.
Yeah, Sinister London, I think, has resulted in the craziest games, I think, out of every location that I've seen. I'm very happy to see Sinister Location when I'm playing my Wave Jubilee deck. I snap almost immediately when I see this because I know that I can slam down huge cards. I can play like Iron Man, I can play Infinite there, and get a copy of it somewhere else is pretty crazy. I will say that there's an interesting interaction where if a different location is completely filled, then the card is guaranteed to go to one specific location. So with a little bit of planning, you can put your copies of your cards right where you want them to go.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of play your board correctly so that you get the best benefit at that location. Well, up next we have Sokovia. Sokovia reads, discard a card from each player's hand. Kind of depressing when you think of Sokovia in the MCU and stuff like that. But you think of people dying or something like this. But sometimes it doesn't make that too big of an impact in a game. Other times my opponent sees, one of my most important cards get deleted, and I'm unsure how to proceed.
Yeah, Sokovia is another interesting one where it can completely screw you. It can completely screw your opponent. There's almost zero situations where either of you want to discard a card. So the only deck that wants that to happen is obviously discard decks, but we haven't seen too many of those. So it really is just a challenging location that it might result in a retreat. So you just kind of have to play around it and see what gets discarded for you and your opponent.
Yeah. Up next, we have Stark Tower, another themed card that kind of goes with the character cards. I'll let you speak to that. It says, at the end of turn 5, give all cards here +2 power. What are your thoughts with Stark Tower?
Stark Tower is super interesting. It's similar to Muir, Muir Island, where you want to have 4 cards here on turn 5 in order to get the maximum amount of power. I love the theme of that you want to play Iron Man on turn 5 at Stark Tower. In order to get the +16 total massive power swing. So that's a really cool theme. I really like Stark Tower. There's some really interesting counterplay if you can destroy or mess up what your opponent's trying to do on the other side. You can win this location by playing cards like Elektra and whatnot. So.
Hey everybody, I wanted to jump in here for just a second to tell you about Anchor. Anchor is a tool that I am using to create this podcast and distribute it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and various other podcasting platforms. Anchor is an app you can download for free on the App Store and use to record, edit, add sound effects, etc., and distribute your podcast. I chose to use it because it was very simple to get up and going quickly, and it was free to use. If you have a podcast idea that you've been throwing around in your mind and you'd like to get out there, make sure to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and create your podcast today.
Up next, we have Strange Academy. Strange Academy reads, at the end of turn 5, move all cards here to other random locations. My question is, do you try to load this up and then build the rest of your board to kind of force cards going to it, or do you try to avoid this until kind of the end game and just slam something down here on turn 6?
Strange Academy is a super interesting one. There's different decks have different ways to approach it. So when I'm playing a big deck, I like to fill up. I like to just let my cards get moved out of the way so I can play one big card here and win the location on turn 6. But if I'm playing like a swarm deck, I can build, if I can fill my board enough, then I can make it so my cards won't move at all because they can't. There's no other location that they can go to, so they'll just stay at that location. If my opponent's cards get moved, then I can win that location potentially.
Yes, great point. Definitely can kind of play the bigger deck that your opponent may have. Up next, we have Terrania or Subterranea. The description reads: shuffle 5 rocks into each deck. Again, just for the listeners, rocks are 1 cost, 0 power cards. Yeah, I don't know if I have much to say about this other than I don't love drawing rocks most times.
Yeah, this is another one that's pretty random. If you draw more rocks than your opponent, most likely you're going to lose the game. So it comes down to, you need to be smart about when to retreat, and when to snap with this location.
Yeah. Up next is a card. It's feels bad when you've played this. I played a card here before it flips. It's the bar with no name. It says whoever has the least power here wins. More often than once, I put my 1-drop here before it is revealed, and it's revealed, and then my opponent doesn't play anything there the whole game, and I kind of just lose that location by default really early in the game.
Yeah, this is a super interesting one because if you see it and know that it's there, then you basically are playing a 2-location game. So it comes down to a tiebreaker of who can just put more raw power, because usually one of you will win 1 location each. I'm very excited to see the bar with no name as our feature location at some point, because there's a few cards in the game that give you negative points. So I'm super interested to see the weird decks that people come up with in order to win this location.
Yeah, the negative power meta. It'll be interesting to see. Up next, we have the Big House. Big House reads 4, 5, and 6 cost cards can't be played here. So kind of the opposite of Crimson, right? Where that was 1, 2, 3 cards can't be played here. This is 4, 5, 6 cards can't be here. So kind of the opposite.
Yeah, the Big House is interesting because you want to be able to put a lot of power to location, but generally your 1, 2, and 3 cost cards don't put out a ton of power. So the Big House is perfect for those, quote unquote powerhouse 2 and 3 cost cards like Collector and Dinosaur to stick in there in order to get enough power to win the location.
Yes, it plays really well into those decks that have those really powerful low cost cards. Up next is the Hub. The Hub reads, add a random card to each player's hand. So kind of like an Agent 13, but for free for both players, right? You kind of get that random card that just adds a little extra pizzazz to a match. Sometimes your opponent gets a much better card than you. You really don't know. What are your thoughts here? I mean, I just you just take what it gives to you, and you make the call how you're going to play.
Yeah, I think it's pretty random effect, but usually, getting more cards in your hand is usually not bad. So you can kind of work with the card that you get for random. Sometimes you'll play it, sometimes you won't. So you just you kind of play around with it.
Up next, we have the Space Throne, which reads, only 1 card can be here for each player. My first question before we actually talk about this location is, hopefully I'm not the only person that's done this, but have you ever got squirrels stuck in this location?
Oh, absolutely. Yep, that has happened even multiple times today. Yep, that has happened. So
okay, good. Just want to make sure I'm not the only one. That happens to me all the time. Play Squirrel Girl, add squirrels to the other locations, then this flips on turn 2 or 3, and it's like, well, okay. Hopefully my opponent also locked out that location already too. But yeah, I mean, obviously, joking aside, what's your strategy with Space Throne? I'm assuming similar to Atlantis.
Yeah, Space Throne is very interesting because there's a bit of different counterplay compared to Atlantis, because Atlantis, at least you can put 4 cards there if you need to, right? You can adapt and change. Where Space Throne, you can only have 1 card here unless you played cards there before it flipped. So a lot of people like to put their biggest cost card, the most powerful card here on turn 6 in order to win it. But there's a bit of counterplay. There's like Professor X that if he gets played there early, can lock down the location and just win it for free. There's cards that can add location or add power from the sides, and it's super interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely a fun one. Up next, we have the Superflow. I enjoy this one as well.
It reads, if you have no cards here, +1 energy each turn. So another one that kind of boosts the energy. I mean, there's kind of two ways really you can think of boosting energy. Either your costs of your cards go down, or you actually get more energy to spend. Both have a similar effect, slightly different. I've had games where Elysium and this show up at the same time, so all cards cost 1 less, and I get an extra energy per turn, which just is very fun to play with.
Yeah, the Superflow is very cool. It is challenging because if you play a card here or get a card here before it flips, then you're not getting that energy, and your opponent has a lot of information, and they know that, okay, I have this energy. They don't. I have a much better chance of winning. So when you get unlucky, then there could be some issues. But otherwise, it allows for you to play some combos of cards that you wouldn't normally be able to play in a normal match.
Yeah, great point. Up next, we have the Vault. It reads, on turn 6, cards can't be played here. So similar card to some of the other ones where kind of certain turns you're locked out of playing. So this one lets you play on the first 5 turns. Definitely can lead to that scrambling by you and or your opponent, right? Where, okay, I need to hurry and load this one up kind of through the middle of the game because I'm not going to be able to drop anything here turn 6, which can, either you play into that strategy or maybe you just let your opponent kind of max this out and you focus.
Yeah, this is also similar to the Kiln, where you can cards can't be played here on turn 6. So you can add cards like by moving or adding power later on. So there is potential to put cards into the vault after it's been closed. So there's a bit of counterplay there as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely plays into the move meta, the move strategy. Up next, we have Tinker's Workshop. +1 energy this turn. I'll be honest, we've talked about a couple ones that either lower costs and or give you more energy. This one kind of feels bad compared to those ones because it's just 1 energy on 1 turn, and it's obviously either turn 1, 2, or 3 when this flips. So yes, I mean, it's nice. Sometimes you get like a 2-cost card down on turn 1, etc. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this one?
Tinker's Workshop can be game changing if you have the cards in hand on those first few turns in order to take advantage of it. Frequently, I run into a problem where I don't have the cards to take advantage of it. So it really depends on the player's hands, but you can definitely get ahead on the board with that 1 extra energy, potentially letting you do a combo that you wouldn't be able to sometimes on early turns.
Yeah. Yep. I run into the same problem. It seems like it never quite syncs up with how it could sync up with my deck. Up next, we have Titan. Titan reads 6-cost cards cost 1 less. I mean, obviously, if you're playing a deck with a lot of big cards, you've got maybe an Infinite, and you've got a Hulk or Chavez, something where you're trying to pull really big cards out. If this pops up, you're probably feeling pretty happy because you may be able to pull a 6-cost card with Jubilee on turn 4. You could theoretically a 6-cost card on turn 5 and play another one on turn 6.
Yeah, Titan is a very interesting one. Obviously favors decks running big cards. One of my favorite interactions is with the new card Wave, which Wave on reveal, then the next turn cards cost 4. But if you have 2 6-cost cards in hand, they'll each cost 3. So potentially you can play 2 cards and the last turn 2 big cards while your opponent can only play 1 card, which is very interesting.
Oh man, yeah, that sounds like a fun combo to blow out your opponent at the end of the game. Up next, we have Wakanda. Wakanda reads, cards here can't be destroyed. Definitely, we all know Nova Carnage has still been seeing a lot of play. I mean, less once you get into the higher pools, but still sees a lot of play. And this just kind of limits your opponent's ability to get that combo off.
Yeah, if you see Wakanda and your opponent's playing a Nova Carnage deck, you're very happy because you know that they can't do that combo in the lane, which gives you a ton of information to work with, and that they're going to need to use one of the other 2 locations to get their combo off. I also really like Wakanda against Electra because oftentimes if I'm playing, my important 1-drops like Sunspot, for example, I like to play them into Wakanda if possible because then I can't lose them.
Yes, agreed. I definitely feel safe putting cards here and knowing, okay, I can know with a little more surety how my strategy is going to play out. Up next, we have Wakandan Embassy, which reads, give +2 power to cards in players' hands. Obviously, locations flip on turns 1, 2, or 3. So just depending on how the dice roll here, depending on how many cards you've played and how many cards you've drawn, this can buff 1 card, 2 cards, 3 cards, 4 cards, right? It just depends. But obviously, the ideal is this flips when you have maybe 3, 4 cards in your hand.
Yeah, Wakanda Embassy is very interesting. It gives it to both players, so usually it doesn't have too big of an effect because both of your cards are getting bigger. It is more impactful on some cards. So, for example, if your Iron Man gets +2 power, then it's getting +4 power, overall. Or, for example, I like to play decks that copy other cards in your hand, and when that happens, you copy the power as well. So, in those kind of decks, in those situations, you can get some squeeze extra power out with Wakandan Embassy.
Yeah, great point. Well, up next we have Washington, D.C. I like to call it the home of the squirrels because the ability reads, cards here with no abilities have +3 power. We're not seeing any meta of the base cards that don't have a description really get played a ton. I mean, we are, I think, starting to see a little more Hulk play with things like Jubilee, but generally the best thing that I can get out of Washington, D.C. is I can get a squirrel in there and it's it's a 4 power card.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. is actually super interesting because it changes the most efficient place to play your scroll grow because you want to maximize your chances if the next location flips. If it's Washington, D.C., you want to have a squirrel there to get the +4 power. It's also super interesting with cards like Zero that can silence another card because then those cards will get the buffs from Washington. So there's just some different potential there.
Up next, we have Weird World. This reads, both players draw from their opponent's decks. I don't know if this has happened to you, but I've had mirror matches where essentially the person's playing the same deck as me, and I end up pulling from their deck, and it ends up feeling like I'm pulling from my own deck.
Yeah, Weird World is super interesting. I think it comes down to basically how good your starting cards or your first couple draws were if Weird World flipped second or third. If you found the important combo pieces from your deck before you start drawing from their deck, then generally you can win the game.
Yeah, agreed. If you kind of have that 2 or 3 key pieces, like you have Moon Girl and Dino in your hand, or you have Jubilee, right, and you've already kind of drawn that, then you might be in good shape. Up next is Westview. Westview reads, turns into a new location on turn 4. So it kind of has that similarity, obviously, with Scarlet Witch. Kind of that makes you think, okay, this could be any location, right? It's not copying another location on the board, etc., or ruining it. Really makes you think, how much do I want to play into this location before I know what the final location is?
Yeah, Westview is really hard to manage because you have no idea what location it's going to be, like you said. So you can't really plan for it. The interesting thing is that a lot of locations that come out of Westview won't do anything because they do something on turn 3 and it's turn 4, it's turn 5 now because it's the end of turn 4. So they'll just be blank locations. So you can kind of rely on it being a blank location more of the time, but you just have to kind of adapt and play around with what it turns into.
Yep, agreed. Up next, we have World Ship, another very rare location that I believe is in the game, but I don't think I've personally seen it. It reads, destroy the other locations. So it kind of just, this flips over, and then you're playing a 1-location game.
Yeah, you just have to put as much power as possible into this location because it's the only location left. So it creates some interesting turns where you're each sometimes just passing, hoping to drop a better card into it. It is very rare. I think that it's tied with Ego for the most rare, at least that I've seen. I think I've hit it maybe 5 or 6 times. So
yeah. Definitely an interesting one to pop up in the game and really changes what you're trying to accomplish. Up next, we have XMansion. XMansion reads, at the end of turn 3, add a random card here for each player. I like the flavor of this, kind of X-Men, XMansion, right? Kind of like this thing where there's mutants, they're all different and kind of random, have different powers. So at the end of turn 3, add a random card here for each player. What are your thoughts? How do you play around XMansion?
So XMansion is super interesting. There's been lots of games that have been either won or lost due to this, because your opponent could get a huge card, you could get a huge card. One of the most interesting things is that it's putting a physical card at this location. So if you have other cards synergized with having more cards at a location, then you might want to play cards like Ant-Man or whatever into XMansion to get those buffs.
Yeah, this is usually where I lay down an Ant-Man if I see it on the board and I haven't played him yet. Well, up next is our very last location here. Ending with the X's here, we have Zandar. Zandar is a card. It reads, cards here have +1 power. I'm interested in this because anything where it's like, okay, you get a buff, and so the more cards you have there, you get more buffs. But this one doesn't increment every turn. So it's like, even if you have 4 cards here, it's really just a +4 buff. I think I have fallen into the trap sometimes of feeling like I need to commit a ton to this location where maybe I should be committing elsewhere.
Yeah, Zandar is an interesting one because it can be one where, obviously if you play 4 cards here, you're getting the full power, but it's not one where, you necessarily need to play 4 cards here. You're not going to lose the game potentially if you don't play 4 cards here. So having 2 or 3 cards here is still pretty good. Your opponent only has 1 or 2 more power from the location more than you. It's interesting. I think it varies depending on the deck you're playing, how much you commit to it or not.
Yep, agreed. Well, that is all of the locations that are currently in the game. More locations to come in the future. And we'll break those down as they release. But this is kind of the pool that we're seeing in the beta, in the soft release right now. And so we've had the chance to really familiarize ourselves, and it's really fun. I love the concept of locations with this card game, and it's just so fun how every game really plays differently because you kind of have this infinite combinations of some of these locations and how they interact with each other and their abilities. So, Cqarbon, if you had to pick one, we've talked about tons of locations today, I know, but if you had to pick one that's your favorite or just the one you like to see in the most games possible with how you like to play the game, what would it be?
That's a really difficult one. I really I just love the location system and how it, like you said, it keeps every game fresh and it's doing something different than other card games. I guess if I had to pick a favorite, I had a lot of fun when Kiln was the featured location. Just a lot of different strategies, seeing the different ways people tried to put power into the Kiln early or put it later on later turns was super interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I believe that was last week, and definitely some interesting plays. I guess we should just say that too. I mean, part of this game is the featured location system is it kind of creates this drive to try out new decks each week, which I think is very exciting and different from other card games. Very fun to see. Well, before we go, Cqarbon, you're returning to the show, and I know, people have been, wanting to kind of see your streams after the first episode you're on, but please just remind our listeners and any of our new listeners, what is the best way to find you online, consume the content that you're putting out on different platforms, and the best way to support you as a content creator.
Yeah, absolutely. So I stream on Twitch occasionally. It's been a little infrequent over the past couple weeks, but I'm hoping to get back to it here shortly. So you can check me out at twitch.tv/Cqrbon_. That's CQRBON_. I also am currently writing articles for marvelsnap.io, which is a great website to go find, look at browse the cards for the game and build decks. I write articles about the mathematical side of the game. So look, I currently have 1 article out now, and there should be another one coming within the next couple of days, and many more to come. So definitely feel free to head on over there, check out the site, and check out my articles.
Awesome. Well, I would just say, let me know when the article drops. We'll be sure to share it on the Can't Stop Snapping Twitter account. For you listeners, just a reminder that at can't_stop_snap. Make sure to follow us there so that you can be aware of all the new episodes coming out, all of the content creators that we're trying to highlight, and you can kind of give your feedback on the podcast and make any suggestions or anything you'd like to hear on the podcast. With all that being said, thank you for tuning in once again. Thanks for listening, and make sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode.
Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, produced, recorded, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening.